Coming to you from the city that is, in fact, the largest market for country music, it's Ventriloquism Weekly. Today's different. I'm Matt Bailey, and I love when I get to say that. Today is different. I know the last time I said that I was panicking over how you all would react to the great Tom Mullica's Blunt interview, but it turns out I worried over nothing because you guys loved it, and I ended up loving it as well. But today, I ain't panicking. Today, it's actually like I get to eat 2 bowls of ice cream in one shot, to borrow a metaphor from Garth Brooks, and that's appropriate, because our guest today is Steve Kilgore. Vents out there know Steve from the Vent Haven Convention, and as a great, if new, figure maker. But Steve Kilgore is also directly connected to some country music royalty. And y'all know I love country music. It was awesome to hear all the cool things Steve got to do as a ventriloquist growing up in Nashville. I don't want to give too much away, save to say let's get thrown into the ring of fire. Here now, our interview with Steve Kilgore. Steve Kilgore, welcome to Ventriloquism Weekly. How are you today, sir?
Well, Ralph, man, I'm doing just great.
That's fantastic, Steve, fantastic. Now, I have to admit, and I think I talked about, I probably will, it's not recorded yet, but I'm sure I'll talk about this at the beginning of this episode, how today kind of, it's like 2 scoops of ice cream today, because not only are you a ventriloquist, your father was in country music and was a songwriter, and so there's so much about you that I love country music, so there's so much about you that I can't wait to dive in, and I almost don't want to start out with this question, but because there's so much before that with your father that I want to touch on, but let's begin at the beginning. How did you get into ventriloquism?
Well, I'll be glad to talk to you about my dad. He was a country music star. He co-wrote Ring of Fire with June Carter, and Wolverton Mountain was one of his big hits. Then he went on to work with Hank Williams and Sr. and Hank Williams Jr. But we'll talk a little bit about Merle in a minute. But how I got started was I live here in Nashville, Tennessee. We are smack dab in the Bible Belt. I used to say that I had a drug problem. My mother drugged me to church night and day. So, actually, I love the Lord. Yes, I do. I'd go to church all the time. If it was open, we were there. And our preacher, Jimmy Snow, speaking about country music, Hank Snow was a big, big star. He's passed on. And Hank had a son named Jimmy Snow, and named him Jimmy Rogers Snow after Jimmy Rogers, another country singer. But Jimmy was a preacher, and that's the church that we went to. And Jimmy was very open-minded about bringing in singers. I mean, we saw the great singers of all gospel music. But he also, a fellow named Charles Aaron, and Charles did gospel magic, and I was a magician. I started when I was 6 years old. And he also did ventriloquist, and he did chalk art, and he was really great. And so that's how I got hooked up. I was about 11 years old, and Charles came, and he did an entire week every night, and we would have a kids' crusade. And I watched this dummy, and I was just like everybody. I was fascinated with him. And Charles actually had a way of, he was probably not the greatest technical Ben I ever saw, but he had a way of making his figure come alive, which really meant a lot,
That's incredible. So I know that Hank Snow's son running your church. That's cool. Like I said, today is not only the Vent world, but this other world of country music that I just your life touches in. But when you started in Vent, did you start as a performer or did you start as a builder? Because I know I see you post in the groups, and I saw you at Van Haven. You do some great work. Where did building come into it?
All right, I'm going to tell you how building came into it. I'm not bragging, but I started doing magic when I was 6 years old. We'll talk a little bit about country music. My dad was a musician, and he worked with this guy named Buster Doss, who also did movies. He was known as the Cactus Kid. And anyway, long story short, when I was 6 years old, I went to see a show, and half of the show was magic, and half of the show was my dad, singing country music with his band. And so my folks had forgotten to tell me, hey, Steve, guess what? There's really no such thing as magic. So at that time, when I was a kid, magic wasn't on television.
Yeah.
So when I came home after seeing Buster Doss do all that magic stuff, I thought I had seen miracles, And so I was just totally freaked out about magic. So I started doing magic, and I got real, real good at it. And about the time that I met Charles Aaron, I already had a Super X suspension. That's the trick that can make a lady float in the air, or appear to float in the air, and a room full of magic. And so when Charles came to our church with the ventriloquist, I fell in love with Ben. And to get to your question on how I got to be a builder.
Please, take all the time you need. I love when people tell stories. I love it.
I did them over to our house on a Saturday. My mother was the bookkeeper of the church, so we were dear friends with Jimmy Snow, the pastor. So Jimmy and Charles came over to our house, and I showed him all my magic, and, he loved it. And I told him, I said, I'm just really fascinated about how the ventriloquist dummy works. And he says, well, here, I carved this one. I'll take off the back of the head, and I'll show you. And so he showed me. And I was fascinated at the movement. I can tell you this. I'm 58 years old right now, and I can still recall in the 8th grade riding the school bus home thinking about how the pull-push method would move the eyes on the ventriloquist dummy, and thinking that one day I'm going to build me a dummy. And then, of course, I met Bill Boley, who lived in Hopkinsville, which is about an hour and a half from Nashville. And I'd be going to magic meetings, and Bill was a magician as well as a ventriloquist. And so we got to be real good friends. And I spent a lot of time at Bill Boley's house. And Bill would show me techniques. Matter of fact, one of my most treasured days was the day that Bill said, look, Steve, I want you to come up on a Saturday, and we're going to spend the whole morning and afternoon, and I am going to teach you everything I know about building ventriloquist figures. He showed me how he cast them. At that time, he was using Scholastics or something like that smelled, oh, my God, it'd kill you. But he also did ventriloquist wood carving and showed me that. So I have a lot to say, and my building comes from a lot of information I learned from Bill Boley. He was a great guy.
That's awesome. But, I mean, I also think there's inherent in the people who do it and do it well, there's certainly an artistic bone, an artistic knack that you can't learn even if you are learning from Bill Boley. There's just a knack for it. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I'm going to tell you, if someone said, hey, Steve, how do I get started carving a ventriloquist figure? I would tell them, I learned the hard way, but this is what I would do. I would go and get some clay, okay? Because clay is so forgiving. If it don't look right, you just, add a little more clay or take a little clay off. With wood, oh, my God, it's another world, But, yeah, learn to be a sculptor first before learning to be a carver. I'll just say a little bit about carving.
Mm-hmm.
There's a place in Nashville that is called Woodcraft, and you can look it up on the internet, Woodcraft. And they sell Swiss-made carving tools, and I have 15 of these, and the ones I picked out are the ones that I know that I needed, okay? But the average tool costs anywhere from probably $60 to $100. So, I probably have got about $1,200 worth of carving tools, carving chisels, not to mention carving knives. And I also have a stack of basswood. For instance, last week I bought a board that's 8 feet tall, 2.5 inches wide, and about 7 inches across. That board cost $158.
Wow.
Oh, boy, you're thinking a board for $158. But, basswood is the wood that ventriloquist carvers like to use, and that's what I had to get. So when you see a wooden head and you see the price on them, it's an expensive investment just for the get-go. Mm-hmm. So that's why they're so expensive.
That's really insightful. The question here is, I'm very interested to know what you do. Is this how you make your living, or do you have another full-time job that affords you the ability to invest in building such really cool creations?
I'm going to tell you something, and I have to almost laugh saying this. If you tried to make a living out of carbon ventriloquist circuits, you would go absolute broke. I have been working on a dummy for Trish Dunn, who I just love. She's a fantastic person.
Yes, she is. Hi, Trish.
And you know Trish? I know you did.
Oh, I know Trish. I interviewed her and Lori almost a year ago. Yeah, time flies.
A good friend of mine, too. But anyway, long story short, which is impossible by now, I have been working on one dummy for Trish since October. And right now, I'm at about 10 cents an hour. And I'll tell you, you asked me if I'm retired or what I do. Normally, I don't mention this, but what the heck, all of you guys are my friends anyway.
Please.
My dad, Merle Kilgore, co-wrote Ring of Fire
yes.
with June Carter back in the day. And then later on, Johnny Cash recorded the song. And it has been such a big hit. My father passed away in 2005, and my two sisters and I, we received, one of my sisters just passed away, Kim, but we still send it to her family anyway. But the royalties off of that are enough that, to be honest with you, I probably will never have to work again.
Wow.
It just keeps popping up. Everybody's recorded it. Last year, the movie Superman, Man of Steel. Superman walks into a bar, and there's a girl sitting there playing Ring of Fire. Oh, boy, suddenly the chat.
Well, since you brought it up,
I got a good story. My dad was also, he played for Hank Williams Sr. when he was 16 years old. And then he went on the road. He was dear friends with the Hank Williams family. And then Hank Williams Jr. was born. Mm-hmm. And then at 8 years old, my dad went on the road with Hank Williams Jr. and worked with him his entire lifetime until Dad passed away. And he became his manager, and they just had a real great career. But if anybody out there is a Hank Williams Jr. fan, they will know the name Bocephus. That is Hank Williams
yes.
Jr.'s nickname, Bocephus.
Yes, Bocephus.
And I asked my dad years ago, I said, Dad, that's a Bocephus. That's a funny name. I've never heard of that. Where would Hank Sr. give Hank Jr. that nickname? And Dad said, well, Steve, there was a comedian on the Grand Ole Opry, and his name was Rod Brassfield.
Yeah. And
Rod had a ventriloquist dummy that Hank Sr. just loved, and that ventriloquist dummy's name was Bocephus. And so now you know the rest of the story.
That's cool, because I know growing up listening to country music, you hear references to Bocephus. You hear references to that nickname. And so that's really, wow. I know that you came prepared with stories today, so at this point, I don't want to get too off topic from the ventriloquism side of things into the country music side of things, so I'm going to open it up to you to tell another story of this incredible life in Nashville. I rarely just say, tell another story, but you're just one of these guys who has led such an interesting life, so please continue on in this line, in this direction that you were going.
Oh, well, my goodness. I tell you what. Growing up in the music business, it's another world now. But back when I was a kid, it was a real, close-knit family.
Yeah.
I remember one time leaving for school, Johnny Cash is passed out on the couch, and I'm stepping over Roger Miller. I thought every little boy and girl went to school like that, But we had some pretty good parties and some stuff back in those days, and I've always loved it. I want to tell you, as far as performing-wise, from 1980 to 1986, I performed magic and ventriloquism on the Grand Ole Opry every Friday night between 11 and 11:05. As you know, the Grand Ole Opry is a radio show.
Yeah.
And between 11 and 11:05, the NBC News came through. And so the curtain would drop down. I'd walk out there, do my bit. I worked for 5 minutes and made $100.
Great.
The manager, Hal Durham, told me, he said, never tell anybody how much you're making it. I said, well, I wouldn't. He said, yeah, the pickers on the stage are making $58. and I'm paying you $100. I said, oh, good. But that was a great gig, and I got to hang out with so many of the famous stars and stuff back then. And I want to tell you a real quick story about
Please.
Bill Boley. I love Bill Boley, and he was such a funny man. And Bill was, I mean, he would do anything for a joke. Well, in the 70s, the Bigfoot thing came around, and everybody was, Bigfoot sightings and yaddy. Mm-hmm. So Bill told me, he says, I have a gorilla costume. And he says, in the back roads of Hopkinsville, and most of them were dirt roads back then, he says, I'd park my car off the side road, and then I'd walk down to the main road and hide in the bushes. And then when a car came by, I'd run across and throw my arms up, and then run off into the bushes. And I said, you're crazy. He said, yeah, I know. He says, one night I was doing that, and some kids started shooting at me. He said, I never did it again.
Oh, no. That's not.
That's
right.
Wow. A little thing about how I wanted to build ventriloquist figures. I was messing around one day, and I saw on eBay a Mike Brose kit. And I sent off, it was a Fred head. I sent off and got it. And I was working at a Ford car dealership as a finance manager.
Yeah.
They had me working so hard. I worked 6 days a week. I mean, from 7 o'clock in the morning to about 11 at night. Mm-hmm. And I was making good money, but I didn't have time for anything. But I saw this kid and said, oh, man, I want to build this dummy. Well, really, I didn't have any clue how to go about it. Mm-hmm. And then I saw Al Stevens had an essay on puppets and props. You can still find it on there. And it walked you through the steps on how to put together a spread head. So I looked at this and I said, you know what? I'm going to one day retire from this job, which I did, and I'm going to build ventriloquist figures. I put in my second order to Mike Brose for 20 Fred heads, then 10 of his Sparky heads. So I got like a big warehouse full of them, but I have no fear. I'll go cut their ears off and slap some magic sculpt on them, and it's really gave me an opportunity to be real creative. If anybody ever wanted to start building a ventriloquist figure, I can't recommend, Puppets and Props with Mike Brose and his wife Kathy. They're the best, and their stuff is so precision and so easy,
That's awesome.
So that's a great way to get started.
That's great. I'm going to backtrack. I'm not ignoring that, but a question has come into my head that I never thought I'd ever get to ask ever, or especially on this program. What did performing on the Grand Ole Opry teach you about entertainment?
Well, first of all, there's you got to get right into it. The crowd was 3,500 people. And my dad always used to tell me, big crowds are easier to please than small crowds. He said, small crowds, they don't ever clap. But the Grand Ole Opry, you'd walk out, hey, folks, I'm Steve Kilgore. I just want to find out something. Are y'all having a good time tonight? And, boom, you got the immediate response. And so, it was a lot of fun. I want to tell you this story since you've mentioned the Grand Ole Opry again.
Yeah.
Bill Boley was such a good friend of mine. I had this ventriloquist puppet, and I should have looked up the name of it before I got started, but it was one of these kind of puppets that you could stick your arm through the sleeve of this guy, mm-hmm. and it was a puppet that was made out of England, and it just had mouth that worked, and his eyes, had kind of swivel eyes that go back like a doll eye or something. But anyway, I told Bill, I said, Bill, I have got an opportunity. I'm working on the Phenomenon of Benji, and it was the Petticoat Junction people. They were having a show, and they said they want me to come out and do some ventriloquist. And I said, I've got this puppet that don't have a body to it. He said, come on up here, I'm going to make you a body. And so I drove up there, and Bill put together a body, and I said, Bill, what I owe you for doing this? He said, just make me proud and do a good job on the show. So that's one of my wonderful memories of Bill. And Well, let me tell you one thing more. I did school shows between 1980 and 1982, and I charged $100 a show. I was making $200 a day, 5 days a week. My wife at the time was a speech therapist, and she said, I don't understand this, Steve. I got a master's degree, and I go and knock on the door. Pop's had a stroke and can't talk. Everybody's stressed out. You go to school 2 times a day. All the kids are screaming. They love you. It's a giant party. I want to quit being a speech therapist and be an actress. I said, Jenny, are you out of your mind? She says, no, I'm not. I said, well, if you're going to be an actress, I'm sure my dad can get you some video work here in town, but, you'll never be a successful actress here in Nashville. You got to go to either New York or or to L.A.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Philip Gresham, he would know all about that. He's in the theater business. But anyway, she says, well, I am. I'm going to go to L.A. I said, you're going to go to L.A.? And I said, well, I'm not going to go to L.A. She said, I know, it's over. I said, it's over? After 10 years of marriage, we shook hands. She went to Hollywood. I saw her on Spider-Man 2. That was a weird divorce, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
that's the way it goes sometimes.
That's a country music song right there. That's
You know what the old joke is? If you played a country music song backwards, your dog would come back alive, your wife would come back home, and your mother would still be alive.
It's one of those jokes that
one of my school jokes.
Has that?
I go into school, and the dummy, it was skills a dummy, and I do magic, and I do about 7 or 8 minutes of ventriloquist, and I'd always ask to sell the show. I tell the principal, I'd say, hey, look, now, my show comes with a money-back guarantee. I'm talking to the preacher, the principal to try to get the job. I said, if the kids don't like the show, you don't owe me a cent. And so they said, oh, okay, that's pretty good. Money-back guarantee. So at one point, I'd have the kids just rolling around laughing with the dummy, and then the dummy would ask, hey, are y'all having a good time? And everybody would go, yeah. And I'd have the dummy say, y'all want me to come back next year? Yeah. That's okay, well, Skip, it's time for you. And that covered my money-back guarantee. And I said, okay, it's time to get in the suitcase. I don't want to get in the suitcase. Well, you've got to get back in there. We got to all go back to class here. Well, I got an idea. What's your idea? Let's put the principal in the suitcase. It's an old standard line, but guess what? The kids just screamed their head off on me. I love it.
I love it. No, but where I thought you were going with that was an old joke I first heard. My words. I'm dating my soul here. I'm only 20, but that I first heard Shotgun Red tell, which was he's sitting there. Steve Hall would bring him out for about, oh heavens, 15 minutes of at the end of the show, and he'd just done a 90-minute show with his band. And Steve Hall would bring Shotgun Red out, and Steve wasn't a ventriloquist, but he'd bring Red out, and Red would go, yeah, our show comes with a money-back guarantee. We guarantee you ain't getting your money back.
Yeah, that's a good line. I went to see Steve Hall on the General Jackson. After I got divorced, I got married again. I've been married 2.5 times.
Half?
I married the same woman twice.
Ah.
It didn't work. My dad told me it wasn't going to work out. That'll never happen. But anyway, I'm on the General Jackson with my date, and who ended up marrying Sheila. And she was from Somerset, Kentucky. And by chance, she's home watching. I'm sitting there on the front row, and Steve looks down there and says, well, where are you folks from? And I said, well, I'm from Nashville, and she's from Somerset, Kentucky. He said, oh, Somerset, Kentucky. That's where they make those boats, those big giant houseboats. Hey, maybe she can get you a good deal on a boat. I said, she got me a good deal on this boat, $50. He started clapping. Just the tickets back then were $25.
Yeah, I love it.
Anyway, it was a funny bit.
I love it.
I've loved being a ventriloquist and a magician, and building dummies is something I do every single day. My friend, he owns the ventriloquist workshop. I'm sure everybody knows Mike Palmer.
Oh, yes,
and that's
Mike.
kind
Got to
of my
have
home
him
base.
up here.
You can always find me posting something there. But I was carving these dummies, and Mike says, "Wait a minute, Steve. Here you got Abraham Lincoln. You've got the redneck alien that you're making. You've got this little girl you're making. You're carving. Why don't you ever finish these dummies?" And I said, "Well, Mike, it's like this. Sooner or later, I'll finish the dummies. I'm already skilled on mechanics. I know how to do it. It's just a matter of sanding them down a little more and painting them. But I play the fiddle." And I almost said violin. I played the fiddle, and I took fiddle lessons for 2 solid years. Mm-hmm. And here's the problem with being a wood carver. Just like playing the violin. Yep. Just like playing the ventriloquist. Yeah, no. Just like playing the violin, you have to, practice. And if I took one lesson every 6 months, I'd never have learned to play. So what I like to do is I have a ton of basswood in stock right now, and I just carve and get it right and teach myself as I go. But if I just made one dummy, which takes, believe me, about 4 months to make a wood carved dummy, see what I'm saying? I'd rather just carve through them and get better and better at my skill, which I have.
Well, that leads to, sorry to stop you there, but that leads to an interesting question, which is, of the ones that you've completed, since you told Mike you'll get around to finishing them all eventually, what's your favorite?
I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry. I said, of the ones that you've been able to complete, do you have a favorite, or are they like children? Can you pick one?
I'll tell you what my favorite one is. It's the one, it's called Smitty, and it's the one that I donated to the Van Halen. I call it the Van Halen Hall of Fame because it really is,
Yeah, it really is.
I got a great story on you for that. Last year, we went and took the vent figure to the Hall of Fame. And I said, I'm not going to put this guy in a suitcase. I'll just put him in the back of the Toyota and put the seatbelt on him, lock him in. Silver and I are in Louisville on our way down there to Nashville. And we come back out, and there is a policeman and about 3 people standing in front of our car. And I have no idea. And I went over and said, "Well, what's going on?" I said, "Hey, man, how long has this kid been in the back seat?" He was slowed down, We're better to break the window out. I said, "No, that ain't no kid. That's a ventriloquist dummy." So I started a little stir there,
Oh, my word. I don't think you can top that. That's,
Yeah.
Oh,
but, no,
that's funny.
It was a great honor to have that put in there. And she's going to leave it in the newcomers for this year's convention, too. So, I just I did a real good job on that. My friend Matthew Kimbrough helped me paint it, and he did it for free. He's really a great guy. And Bill Nelson, I made a figure for a guy, and he looked at it, and he said, "Steve, you did a great job carving. The mechanics look good, but I could really show you how to paint. Send it to me, and I'll paint it for free."
Wow.
And so that was a terrific honor, too, to have Bill Nelson teach me. And now I'm getting the hang of painting. So, ventriloquist and building is a lot of art. I've even bought a sewing machine this week over at Wally World, because now I'm going to start sewing the arms and the legs. So, like I said, from start to finish, there's a lot of work in vent work.
Oh, there is. So, last question I'll have for you. I normally say, what do you want to see of ventriloquists? What do you want to see of vent figure builders? What do the people creating these instruments, do you tie it back into, and I'm not the only one who calls it, these are instruments. These are our instruments, just like, the guitar is the instrument of the country music performer. The figure is the instrument of the ventriloquist. What do you want to see from the people creating these instruments?
Well, I don't want to step on any toes, but I think the worst problem that vent folks have got is that they're frozen in time. For some reason, look, I love, Jerry Mahoney and Frank Marshall. Everybody wants a Marshall. Of course we do. But as far as my creations go, I want to get out of that. Hey, I got to build something that looks like it was made in 1945.
Yeah.
I want to build things that look alive. I don't want it to look like a cartoon character, which, hey, cartoon characters are great, But the Princess of Diamond building for Trish Dunn right now,
Yeah.
she wants to look like one of her girlfriends that she knows is kind of on the cougar side of life. And so, to answer your question, I see myself as making figures that look like the little boy that's walking back through the car in the seatbelt.
Yes, I was just going to say.
Oh my God.
I love it. That's a great place you can't really top that. Thank you so much, Steve Kilgore. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was wonderful to talk to you. I'm so excited for everybody to get to hear this.
Well, Wild Man, I appreciate you having me on, and I got to tell you this, because your last name is Bailey. I went to all of Bill Bowley's shows, and he would say, the dummy would say, I'm Charlie, and Bill would say, and I'm Bill Bowley, and Charlie would say, hey, yeah, you're the guy that's doing that song that they want you to come home.
Yes.
He said, no, that's Bill Bailey, not Bowley. Anyway, hey, thanks for having me on, man. You're a great guy. Everybody loves your show, and I've really enjoyed being on with you today.
Thank you. I've enjoyed having you. Oh, thank you again to Steve. Thank you so much for sharing so many of your fantastic stories. That was so cool. I never thought I'd get to ask. So, on the Grand Ole Opry, never thought that would come out of my lips here on the show. That's it for us this week. Next week, April kicks off with the result of our hashtag Ask Strassman campaign from late February. That's right, it's finally time. The incredible David Strassman joins us next Monday. A reminder, you can find all you need to know about Ventriloquism Weekly by going to our website, ventriloquismweekly.com. Reach out by emailing ventriloquismweekly@gmail.com, like our page at facebook.com/talkfor2. Tweet at us and tweet about us using @ and hashtag, respectively, talkfor2, TALKFORTWO. From New York, not Nashville, signing off for Ventriloquism Weekly, I'm Matt Bailey, reminding all you vents out there to keep talking for two.